tell I'm not really a theater type, but I play one on TV. Costume change, you're good. I'm a ghost. Like my costume? And I was told I can't cut holes in the sheet because we're on the sheet, so I can't see it. You know, it's good to laugh, isn't it? It is good to laugh. Children, y'all can be dismissed for children's church if you'd like. DJ gave it away? Okay. Don't worry about it. It's good. It's all good. It's all good. Let's use this pulpit mic. We had issues with the little wireless of the cords. Pray that's why it didn't work last week. But I've come to the opinion it's my luck if we don't have something going wrong with electronics or sound or something. You know, it's not a Sunday, right? As you can tell by the title of the sermon, Ooh, Ghost. Halloween is Wednesday. Right, okay, good. Halloween is Wednesday, and I'm a little silly. You know, some people get a little uptight about Halloween, and I understand. You know, there's a lot of dangerous things in this world, a lot of spiritual evil in this world, and sometimes you don't want to play just a little bit. But I grew up, you know, in eastern Lincoln County, near Dutchman's Creek, near the old Brevard place. And the old Brevard place, there's a lot of ghost stories around Dutchman's Creek and the old Brevard place. I used to hear growing up. Used to hear all. We talked about this a little bit Wednesday night, the Wednesday night crew. Grandma and Grandpa would tell me stories. In fact, Grandpa told me a story one time about him and his brother-in-law Charlie. They were down at the creek and probably somewhere near the Pacer land, and they saw this lantern, looked like a lantern, a light cross down through the woods, across the creek, and up the other side and up the hill. I don't know if they'd been dabbling in moonshine that night or what, but they saw something supposedly. That's how the story went, right? So I grew up with these ghost stories. I always had this fascination about ghosts. I do believe in ghosts. We'll talk about that later. I'm a skeptic at most things. But, you know, I like to have a little bit of entertainment. I like to be a little silly. You know, even Bigfoot stuff, I kind of just laugh at a little bit, you know. But I think it's silly and some fun. But ghosts, they do appear in the Bible, believe it or not. Did y'all know that there are ghosts in the Bible? Not just the Holy Ghost, mind you. There are other ghosts. We talked Wednesday night about the story of Jesus walking on the water, and the disciples thought that Jesus was a ghost. Well, the other big passages about ghosts in the Bible is what we'll talk about today in 1 Samuel chapter 28, verses 3 through 25. We're going to talk about ghosts. Now this next slide. This next slide is supposed to be a ghost. That big old red circle there, that's some sort of form that was caught on camera. You know, ghosts are really popular in our culture today, aren't they? You know, there's all these ghost shows. My wife and I, we used to, not long after we got married, just love a show called Ghost Hunters. And there's these ghost adventures, ghost this, ghost that. There's Bigfoot shows, there's alien shows, all kind of these weird TV shows on TV, especially cable. Now we don't have cable, we don't get tempted to watch that junk as much, but ghosts are very much in popularity, and it's Halloween, you know? Especially today as we approach Halloween, things like this are very popular. So we as Christians don't need to so quickly dismiss ghosts away. We often do that, especially if we're consider ourselves sane individuals, supposedly, right? We often dismiss ghosts away, but let's talk a little bit about ghosts. And again, getting back to the passage, 1 Samuel, we're going to talk about Saul and his ghost. We're going to talk about the fact that Saul had a literal ghost visit him, but also some metaphorical ghosts visit him. You know, we often have ghosts in our life, and we're going to talk about that, these metaphorical ghosts. Things that we turn to, things that we go back to that may not be the most healthy. Sins, pet sins we go back to. Maybe bad, broken relationships that we go back to, that we often go back to that harm us, that we shouldn't go back to. Well, Saul did that in some ways. Let's read 1 Samuel. Now Samuel had died, and all of Israel had mourned for him, and buried him in Ramah in his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and the necromancers out of the land. Now, some of the translations will have witches here in a moment, but mediums and necromancers. Not an extra large, not small, but a medium, right? Next set of verses there. The Philistines assembled and came and encamped at Shunem. And Saul gathered all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. Now, so far in the story, Saul has had two big stressors. The first stressor was, back in the previous set of verses there, Samuel had died. His go-to man, his prophet, this man of God who was kind of the go-between between Saul and God. This leader, this very strong leader, this crutch, had died. So Saul was left without his crutch. And these verses we just read, there's another stressor here. The Philistines, this army that was a thorn in the side of the Israelites. And they were camped close. War was getting ready to happen. So Saul was stressed. I can't imagine the type of stress he was under. But the next verse here we're going to read here, verse 6, tells us another stressor here. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. God wasn't talking to Saul. Saul was getting a cold shoulder. No way that Saul had to talk to God was working. The dreams, that's one way God talks to people. I mean, Joseph had dreams, right? Isaiah had visions, something similar to a dream. Or by the Urim, this kind of, for lack of a better term, these holy dice that the priests were allowed to use to kind of figure out the future or what God's will was. These holy dice weren't working. And prophets, individuals who are supposed to be God's mouthpieces, they weren't able to communicate to Saul for God. This is another stressor. God was silent. Saul couldn't hear God at all. So all this stress bearing down on him, he felt he had nowhere else to turn, I'm assuming. So he returns to his ghost, if you will. Saul said to his servant, "Seek out for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her." And his servant said to him, "Behold, there is a medium in Endor." So Saul disguised himself and put on other garments, and he and 2 men went with him. And they came to the woman by night. And he said, "Divine for me a spirit, and bring up for me whomever I shall name to you." I notice he's going at night, dressed up in other clothes. He's so desperate and so ashamed, probably, that he kind of goes under the cover of darkness. Turns this thing he's not supposed to turn to in darkness. The woman said to him, "Surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off the mediums and necromancers from the land. Why then are you laying a trap for my life to bring about my death?" But Saul swore to her by the Lord, "As the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing." Then the woman said, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" He said, bring up Samuel for me." When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. The woman said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." The king said to her, "Do not be afraid. What do you see?" And the woman said to Saul, "I see a God coming up out of the earth." He said to her, "What is his appearance?" And she said, "An old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a robe." And Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed with his face to the ground and paid homage. And Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" Saul answered, "I'm in great distress, for the Philistines are warring against me, and God has turned away from me, and answers me no more, either by prophets or by dreams. Therefore I have summoned you to tell me what I shall do." And Samuel said, "Why then do you ask me, since the Lord has turned away from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done to you as he has spoken by me, for the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David." I told you so, right? Because you did not obey the voice of the Lord and did not carry out his fierce wrath against Amalek, Therefore the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will give Israel also with you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons shall be with me. The Lord will give the army of Israel also to the hand of the Philistines. Then Saul fell on the ground, full length on the ground, filled with fear because of the words of Samuel. And there was no strength in him, for he had eaten nothing all day and night. The ceremony probably had lasted all day and all night. And the woman came to Saul, and when he saw that he was terrified, she said to him, Behold, your servant has obeyed you. I have taken my life into my hand and have listened to what you have said to me. Now therefore you also obey your servant. Let me set a morsel of bread before you and eat, that you may have strength when you go on your way. He refused and said, I will not eat. But his servants together with the woman urged him, and he listened to their words. So he arose from the earth and sat on the bed. Now the woman had a fattened calf in the house, and she quickly killed it. She took flour and kneaded it, and baked unleavened bread of it. She put it before Saul and his servants, and they ate. Then they rose and went away that night. There's a lot of things I could say about this passage, a lot of different angles we can poke and prod it, but I want to talk about the supernatural world. You know, growing up as a Southern Baptist, we didn't talk a lot about the Holy Spirit. We didn't talk a lot about speaking in tongues. Because I joked around earlier about the song that the choir sang, the Latin song, speaking in tongues. Well, that's something the charismatics do. We don't do that as Baptists. We often, some Baptists even sometimes ignore the Holy Spirit, to be honest with you. We don't deal with the spiritual world very nice. But there is a spiritual world. Even though our rational, scientific world urges us that the Spirit's not real, this whole spiritual world's not real, God's not real, this whole miracles or healing, it's not real, it's science. There is a spiritual world that we need to wrestle with and deal with. So let's look a little bit about this passage and a few things of the spiritual world. Let's talk about ghosts and the supernatural. Now this passage has this medium, the old King James calls her a witch, this necromancer, this person who speaks to the dead, has this medium here. Spirit worlds, or the spirits usually supposedly spoke to these mediums alone. They sometimes played instruments to conjure up the spirits. It was like a seance. In Mesopotamian literature, you'll see Ishtar's bow mentioned, a special instrument played. And these seances were usually done during certain times of the months or during festivals. The Egyptians often communicated with the dead by putting letters in a tomb. The ancient world, they believed in this stuff. A lot of these cultures did, but the Israelites were a little different. God told them to be different, be set apart, be holy. So guess what? Deuteronomy 18:10, the practice was banned. Here's Deuteronomy 18:10 through 11. There must not be anyone among you who passes his son or daughter through a fire. That was a worship of the pagan god passing through a fire. Molech was one of those gods that burned the children as sacrifice. Who practices divination, is a sign reader, fortune teller, sorcerer, or spellcaster, who converses with ghosts or spirits or communicates with the dead. So the act of necromancy, the act of sign reading, fortune telling, spell casting, divination for the most part, and passing children through the fire is banned in Deuteronomy because it plays with an evil spiritual world to some degree. Notice all the discussion of signs and fortune telling stuff is lumped into the category of making your children pass through the fire. And passing through the fire for the children was a sacrifice to a pagan god, to an evil spirit. And if fortune telling and necromancy, all this stuff is banned in the Bible because most times it can lead to open up doors to evil demonic spirits. And God's warning us not to play with fire because we might get burned. Let's talk a little bit about ghosts. There's a lot of lore in the ancient world about ghosts. We talked a little bit about it Wednesday night. Ghosts would sometimes appear in dreams or as manifestations. In ancient literature, they often haunted as a result of improper burial and one a desire for proper burial. Ghosts supposedly haunted locations of the dead or their remains. They supposedly appeared at night. They're supposedly difficult to see. They caused fear and terror. Sometimes their appearance was an omen or death or destruction. That's how people viewed ghosts in the ancient world. And a lot of times, ghosts were often associated with evil spirits or demons in the ancient world. And there are references in the Bible to ghosts. 1 Samuel 28, Matthew 14:26, Mark 6:49, Luke 24:37. Mark 6:49 is that scene where Jesus is on the side of the hill. He sent the disciples away. They're out on a boat. It's early in the morning, somewhere between 3 and 6. They're struggling out on the boat. Wind storm's raging. They think they're going to drown type thing. And Jesus looks out and he sees them. He starts walking on water. He's walking on water and walks past them just a little bit. And they thought they saw a ghost. The Greek word there is essentially the word we get phantasm from. The word for ghost in the English language some ways. They thought they saw a ghost, but it was Jesus. They mistook God in the flesh for a ghost. Over in Luke 24:37, after the resurrection, the disciples thought they saw a ghost. So we see ghosts pop up in ancient literature. I don't know what these people who see ghosts and know of ghosts, I don't know. I've never experienced a ghost or seen a ghost in modern day. But I do know this, there is a spiritual world. There are some things I can't explain. There may be ghosts. But there also may be evil spirits and demons that deceive us. And we think there's something there that's a ghost or something maybe evil. With that in mind, let's look over at demons. And the Bible tells us about demons. They're spiritual beings. They're not omnipresent. They're not omniscient. They're not omnipotent. They're not God. They inflict disease, influence the mind, deceive people. And there are multiple occasions in the Bible where they possess people. Matthew 4:24, 8:16, 8:28, 8:33, 12:22, 15:22, Mark 1:32, Mark 5:15, Mark 5:16, 18, Luke 8:36, John 10:21. These examples are examples of people being possessed, demon-possessed in the Bible. Demons are real. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled is convincing people he doesn't exist. He and his minions are out there tempting us, trying to lure us astray, trying to influence our minds, deceive us, and convince us that they're not real. But the more and more I look out at this world today, the more and more I'm convinced that the devil is real and his minions are everywhere. They're everywhere. And maybe they have to do with ghosts. I don't know. But I just know there's a spiritual world that we ignore. But we can't ignore the devil and his demons. We can't ignore them. There's too much evil in our world today to us to so quickly dismiss the spiritual world and dismiss what evil is working in our world today. What deception and lies that we hear out there today. And all this talk about fake news, I sometimes think the devil's behind this fake stuff, these lies. He's the king of lies. But the good thing is there's also a good spiritual world as well. We find in the Bible talk of angels, spiritual beings, created beings. They're a higher order than humanity. There's good and bad. We don't need so quickly to dismiss the spiritual world. We need to be mindful of it, cognizant of it, if you will, just in case the devil comes knocking on the door. But Saul wasn't just haunted by literal ghosts. He was also haunted by other types of ghosts. Let's look at Saul's ghost. I'm defining ghosts as the things that come back to haunt us or things from our past that we hold on to that we should let go of. Now, we talked about earlier that Saul was stressed. He had his crutch, his prophet in his life died. Samuel died. Samuel was a compass, a crutch, if you will. He had the impending battle with the Philistines. And God wasn't talking to him. No matter how he tried, God wasn't talking to him. So Saul was under great stress. So he turned to things in his life that he should have put away. Things from his past that should have been long gone. He turned to sin. He turned to necromancy, a thing that was banned in Deuteronomy. He turned to disobedience, disobeying God's law by doing this necromancy. You see, Saul had a track record, a history of being disobedient to God. Over 1 Samuel 13, he improperly sacrificed to God. He was supposed to wait on Samuel before the sacrifice was made before a battle, but Saul was impatient. So guess what he did? He sacrificed the animal to God, and God was upset about that. Over in 1 Samuel 15, he was told to wipe out a whole people group, the Amalekites. But he spared King Agag and some of the best livestock. God was upset. In fact, in 1 Samuel 15:11, God says he regretted that he made Saul king. Saul was very disobedient. Just at the time in his life where he probably should be obedient and listen to God, or try to wait on God, he turned back to the ghost of his past. This sin and this disobedience turned to evil instead of to God, and waited on God. But he also turned to other ghosts in his life. He went back to Samuel. You see, Samuel was a crutch in his life. Samuel was, like I said earlier, a go-between between God and Saul. Somebody that was, he leaned on heavily. Gave him direction in life. Gave him purpose. Gave him thrust. Thorn in the flesh sometimes maybe, but he turned back to Samuel. So the question is for us, what are our ghosts in our life? What are some things that we turn to, some people we turn to that are ghosts in our life? What past decisions have come back to haunt us? You ever made a decision in the past and it's come back to bite you in the butt, as the expression goes? Sometimes those ghosts of the past come back to get us because we made poor decisions in the past. What unhealthy relationships do we return to in times of trouble? I've known some people that, especially a family member of mine who, she has a reputation of being able to marry alcoholics. Married 2 alcoholics and abusive alcoholics, and the guy she's married to now is not abusive and he's a recovering alcoholic, but she knows how to pick him. We often in times of trouble return to people that are unhealthy for us. You know, sometimes people who are drug addicts, they return to the buddies that used to get them high or help them get high when they're stressed. So they're finding new and better and productive relationships. Sometimes we're like that. What sins do we return to or turn to when we're troubled? Maybe some of our past sins or pet sins that give us comfort. I've mentioned y'all before, one of my pet sins is gluttony. When I get stressed, I eat. If it's fried, I love it. That's one of the sins, one of the ghosts I turn to in my life when I'm stressed. But some other ghosts. What hinders us from being mindful of the spiritual world battling all around us? I'm the type of person, I like empirical evidence of stuff. I like proof. I want to see a picture of Bigfoot hold the newspaper dated today, you know, with a reporter and a video camera, you know. and then have that, and then I need to poke and prod that Bigfoot with my finger to make sure he's real. But you know what? I can't see the demons around me. I can't see the angelic beings around me working, especially the angelic beings working at God's behest and the demons working at the devil's behest. But I know they're there because the Bible tells me so. I just need to believe that they're there and trust that God is working in my life and keep my eyes on Him and be mindful that sometimes the devil comes at us like a roaring lion, especially with his minions. But my skepticism, my desire for rationalism says, no, spiritual world ain't real. That hinders me. Maybe that's a ghost. What are your ghosts? What things from your past come back to haunt you? What sins come back to haunt you? What people come back to haunt you? So my challenge to you today is, think about the ghost in your life, the metaphorical ghost. What can we do to break that cycle of the ghost coming back to haunt us? What can we do to change our life where those past decisions don't come back to haunt us, where our unhealthy relationships don't come back to haunt us, where our sins don't come back to haunt us? We can turn to God and follow Him. As musicians come and as we sing here in a moment, what ghosts are in your life? What ghosts are in your life?